victim's father suddenly appeared, shot Doucet while news cameras were rolling.
The camera is already rolling when it happens. It is March 16th, 1984. Baton Rouge Metropolitan Airport. A news crew is there for the arrival. A routine piece, the kind local stations cover because it gives the story a visual. A man is being brought back to Louisiana by law enforcement after being apprehended in California. The case had been in the local news for weeks. People knew the name. People had feelings about it. The officers walk through the terminal, cameras running, sound on. A man steps out from behind a payphone. He is wearing a cap pulled low. He has a .38 revolver in his hand. One shot. The officers tackle him immediately. The man they were escorting collapses to the floor. The whole thing takes less than 3 seconds. The camera catches all of it. The man who fired the shot does not run. He does not resist. He stands there while the officers restrain him, and his face, caught on tape, broadcast on local news, reprinted in papers across the country, shows almost nothing. Not panic, not rage. Something closer to relief. His name was Gary Plauche. The man he shot was Jeff Doucet. And what Gary Plauche did that afternoon in a busy airport terminal, in front of news cameras and law enforcement, in broad daylight, with absolutely no attempt to conceal it, is only the beginning of this story. Because Gary Plauche was charged with second-degree murder. He stood before a judge, and he never spent a single day in prison. Before we get to the airport, 3 things need to be understood. The first, who was Jeff Doucet, and how did a man like him get close enough to a family to do what he did? The answer involves a process so methodical, so calculated, and so deeply uncomfortable to examine that most people who know this case have never looked at it directly. The second, what does it do to a father? Not in the abstract, not as a thought experiment, but in actual, measurable psychological reality, to know that someone did this to his child. What does it do to the hours of a day, to the way a person thinks, to the line between what a person believes and what a person does? The third, why did the justice system let Gary Plauche walk free? Not as an error, not as an oversight, as a decision. We will get to all of it, but to understand the 3 seconds at the airport, you have to start much earlier. With a karate school in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, with a man who knew exactly how to make a family trust him, and with an 11-year-old boy named Jody. Jeff Doucet was 25 years old when he opened a karate school in Baton Rouge in the early 1980s. He was personable. He was patient with children. Parents liked him. He had a way of making families feel that their kids were in good hands, that he was invested, that he cared, that he saw potential in their child specifically, not just the class as a whole. Jody Plauche started training there when he was around 10 years old. What happened next followed a pattern that child protection researchers have documented across thousands of cases. A pattern so consistent that it has its own name: grooming. It does not begin with harm. It never begins with harm. It begins with attention, with a trusted adult making a child feel uniquely seen, special, chosen. It begins with small gifts, small privileges, small moments that a child interprets as warmth and an adult knows as investment. It spreads to the family. Doucet became a presence in the Plauche household. He built trust with the adults as deliberately as he built it with the child. Parents who trust a person do not watch that person the way they watch a stranger. That is precisely the point. Over months, the relationship became something the Plauche family had no framework to recognize as dangerous, because it had been constructed specifically to avoid triggering that recognition. This is worth dwelling on, because people who hear about grooming for the first time often ask the same question: how does a parent not see it? The answer is that they were not supposed to see it. The entire architecture of the process is built around the trusted adult managing the perceptions of the family as deliberately as they manage the relationship with the child. Suspicion requires a reason. Doucet gave the Plauche family no reason. He gave them the opposite: That is not a failure of parenting. That is not naivety. That is a predator executing a strategy that is specifically designed to be invisible to the people it is designed to deceive. Jody was 11 years old. Doucet was 25. And in February 1984, Jeff Doucet took Jody Plauche from Louisiana to a motel room in Anaheim, California. Gary Plauche came home to find his son gone. There is a particular quality to the fear that descends when a child goes missing. People who have experienced it describe it in ways that don't map neatly onto ordinary language. It is not anxiety. It is not worry. It exists below the level of coherent thought, in a part of the brain that predates language and operates on pure animal instinct. It does not sleep. It does not take breaks. It does not respond to reason or reassurance. Gary Plauche knew Doucet was involved almost immediately. The circumstances left little room for other interpretations. And knowing who had his son, and roughly what that meant, did not make the waiting more bearable. It made it immeasurably worse. Law enforcement moved on the case. The FBI became involved. The search spread across state lines. And then in California, Jody called home. He was alive. He told his family where he was. The call was traced. Within hours, law enforcement had a location. Jeff Doucet was taken into custody in Anaheim without incident. Jody was safe. The word safe is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Jody was physically unharmed in the sense that he was breathing and could walk and had no injuries that required immediate medical attention. Everything else that the word safe implies, none of that was certain. None of that could be confirmed by a phone call or a location trace or a clean bill of physical health. Gary Plauche flew to California to bring his son home. He sat with Jody in a hospital room in Anaheim. He listened to what his son told him. We do not know exactly what was said in that room because Gary never disclosed it fully, and Jody, writing about it as an adult decades later, described it with the halting precision of someone who has spent years choosing which words are survivable to put on a page. What we know is that Gary Plauche left California knowing everything, and he made a decision. Jeff Doucet was being extradited back to Louisiana to face charges. The logistics of extradition are not dramatic. They are procedural. An officer or a team of officers transport a suspect from one jurisdiction to another. Paperwork, handcuffs, a flight, an arrival at an airport. Gary Plauche knew the flight number. He knew the arrival time. He knew the terminal. He arrived at Baton Rouge Metropolitan Airport before the flight landed. He positioned himself near a payphone in the arrivals area, holding the receiver to his ear as though he were in the middle of a call, his cap pulled low, his back partly to the corridor where the officers would walk through. He waited. He had a .38 caliber revolver in his jacket. There is a version of this moment that is easy to describe as calculated, premeditated. The word the law would later use is exactly that, premeditated. He knew Doucet was coming. He knew the route. He placed himself there deliberately. He brought a weapon. But there is something in the footage, something in the way Gary Plauche stands at that payphone, the stillness of him, the controlled and terrible quietness of a man who has arrived at a point beyond grief and beyond rage, somewhere on the other side of both, that resists the clinical language of premeditation. He was not calculating an outcome. He had already accepted one. The officers walked through. Doucet was between them in handcuffs. Gary stepped out. One step. The gun came up. One shot. To the head. The officers had Doucet on the ground and Gary pinned against the wall in seconds. Gary did not resist. He did not say anything. He let them take the gun. He let them put the cuffs on. He stood there and let it happen, the way a man stands in the rain because standing in the rain was the point. The camera that captured it was recording for a local news broadcast. By that evening, the footage was on television stations across the country. By the following morning, Gary Plauche was a household name. The charge was second-degree murder. In Louisiana in 1984, second-degree murder carried a mandatory sentence of life without the possibility of parole for 20 years. This was not a charge the prosecution filed reluctantly or apologetically. Jeff Doucet was in law enforcement custody. He was unarmed. He was handcuffed. He had been shot in the head in a public terminal by a civilian who had stationed himself there with a weapon and waited for him to arrive. Under the law, the elements of the charge were straightforward. What was not straightforward was everything else. The phone at the district attorney's office did not stop ringing. Letters arrived by the hundreds. The public response to the footage was not outrage at Gary Plauche. It was not horror at what had happened in the airport. It was something that made the prosecution's position genuinely complicated to maintain. It was support. People watched a father walk up to the man who had abducted and abused his 11-year-old son and shoot him dead on camera. And a significant portion of those people, not a fringe, not a vocal minority, but a measurable and vocal majority of the people weighing in publicly, said some version of the same thing. He did what any father would do. Whether that is true, whether it is even a coherent claim, we will come back to. But it is what people said, and it had weight. Gary Plauche pleaded no contest. The judge, and this is the part that requires the most careful examination, sentenced him to 7 years, suspended. No prison time. 5 years of probation. 300 hours of community service. Gary Plauche walked out of that courtroom and went home. Jeff Doucet's family received a different kind of verdict, one nobody announced. The legal reasoning behind the sentence was not simple, emotional indulgence of a grieving father. The judge, Ernest Drake, made a considered decision based on multiple factors: Gary's lack of prior criminal record, the psychological evaluation findings, the assessment that he presented no ongoing danger to the public, and a statutory framework that gave the court discretion in cases where mitigating circumstances were deemed sufficient. But the mitigating circumstances were doing something extraordinary in this case. They were effectively encoding into a legal proceeding the principle that what Jeff Doucet did to Jody Plauche was so severe, so far beyond the ordinary scale of harm that the law is built to address, that it partially excused what Gary did in response. This is not a principle the law states explicitly. It cannot. A justice system that openly acknowledged that certain victims deserve to be killed by private citizens outside of any legal process, regardless of their custody status at the time, would not be a justice system in any functional sense. And yet, the outcome, the suspended sentence, the probation, the community service, the going home, suggested that in practice, in this specific case, in this specific courtroom, with this specific judge and this specific set of facts, something very close to that principle had been applied. Think about what that means. Gary Plauche bypassed the entire legal process that had been designed to handle exactly this situation. Doucet was in custody. He was facing charges. He would have gone to trial. He would, in all likelihood, given the evidence, have been convicted and sentenced. The system, the same system that Gary implicitly rejected in that airport terminal, was for once positioned to work. Gary did not wait to find out, and the system, having watched him refuse to use it, declined to punish him seriously for that refusal. Jody Plauche grew up. He became a man. He built a life. He worked in the gaming industry. He married. He had children of his own. He wrote a book published in 2013 called Why, Gary, Why? The title drawn from the words a reporter shouted at his father as he was being led away from the airport in handcuffs. A question Gary did not answer on camera. A question Jody spent 3 decades learning to sit with. The book is not a celebration. It is not a condemnation either. It is something more complicated and more honest than either of those things. Jody wrote about what it meant to be the child at the center of this story, not as a symbol, not as a legal exhibit, not as the reason a man pulled a trigger on live television, but as a person who grew up carrying a set of experiences that did not resolve cleanly into either trauma or triumph. He wrote about the abuse itself, described with the precision of someone who has spent years deciding how much of the truth is necessary and how much is simply pain given unnecessary form on the page. He wrote about watching his father shoot a man on a television screen that was broadcasting live from an airport where he knew, with complete certainty, that his father was waiting. He wrote about the guilt. That is the part that surprises people who encounter this case, expecting a clean narrative. The guilt Jody carried, not for what Doucet did to him, which was not his fault in any conceivable sense, but for being the reason. For the suspended sentence and the probation and the community service hours and the years of his father's life that existed under legal supervision because of something that began with Jody walking into a karate school. He knew that was irrational. He said as much plainly in the book. It was there anyway. It stayed. Gary Plauche spent the rest of his life in Louisiana. He was not imprisoned. He was not formally celebrated. He gave occasional interviews. He answered the question, why, in different ways at different points in his life, and the answers were never quite the same, which is what honest answers to impossible questions usually look like. He died in August 2014. He was 67 years old. His son was with him. There is a question at the center of this case that the footage and the sentence and the public reaction and Jody's book all circle around without ever fully settling. Was Gary Plauche right? Not legally. Legally, the question was settled. He committed the act, he was charged, he was sentenced, the sentence was suspended. The legal record is clear. Was he right? The instinct that most people feel when they watch that footage, the instinct that drove the hundreds of letters to the district attorney, the phone calls, the overwhelming public sentiment that Gary Plauche had done something understandable, if not justifiable. That instinct is real. It is not manufactured. It is not the product of poor judgment or insufficient information. It is the product of something very deep in the way human beings think about children and harm and the limits of what a parent can be expected to absorb without breaking. But there is another question underneath that one. What does it mean that the legal system agreed? Not officially, not in any statement or ruling that used that language, but functionally, practically, in the thing that actually happened, the man walked out. The calculation was made, somewhere in the gap between the charge and the sentence, that what Gary Plauche did, while technically criminal, did not warrant the punishment that the law would normally require. That calculation happens constantly in courts. Discretion is part of the design. Judges are human beings applying judgment, not algorithms applying formulas. But the effect of that particular exercise of discretion, in this particular case, was to say something publicly about the value of Jeff Doucet's life relative to the harm he caused. To place it, implicitly and without official acknowledgement, below a threshold that would normally require serious consequence for the person who ended it. Jeff Doucet was a predator. What he did to Jody Plauche was real, documented, and devastating. Nothing in this story requires sympathy for him. But the precedent, the quiet, unspoken, never officially acknowledged precedent set by a suspended sentence for a public, premeditated, camera-recorded shooting is worth sitting with. Because precedents do not stay in the cases that create them. They travel. And the question of who gets to decide that a life has fallen below the threshold that requires justice is not a question with a comfortable answer when it belongs only to the person in most pain. Gary Plauche stood at a payphone in an airport and waited for the man who hurt his son to come through the terminal. He had the footage. He had his own memory of California. He had whatever Jody told him in that hospital room that he never repeated publicly and never needed to. He made a decision that millions of people watching the footage understood, felt in their chest before they understood it in their head. The primal clarity of a parent and a child, and a wrong that felt too large for the ordinary machinery of consequence to address adequately. He pulled the trigger. He went home. And somewhere in this country tonight, there is a courtroom processing a case not entirely unlike this one. There is a prosecutor weighing charges against someone who did something the law calls criminal and the public calls justice. There is a judge preparing to exercise discretion in one direction or another. And there is a parent sitting somewhere, waiting, who has already made their own calculation and is not thinking about precedent or legal philosophy or the long-term implications of extrajudicial violence for the integrity of democratic institutions. They are thinking about their child. The question is not whether you understand that. You do. Everyone does. The question is what we build a society on when we all understand it and we still have to decide what happens next. Gary Plauche decided. The judge decided. The system moved on. Jody Plauche wrote a book called Why, Gary, Why? And never fully answered the question in the title, because some questions are not asked in order to be answered. They are asked because living with them is the only honest thing left to do.